This fellow named Joe, he walked out into the street, and he managed to get and this is like downtown New York City, really busy, but he managed to get a taxi like really, really fast. And he gets into the cab, and the cab driver says, it's perfect timing. You're just like Brian. Who? Who? He said. And the cab driver says, oh, Brian Smith. That was a guy who did everything right. And just like my coming along when you needed a cab, things just seemed to fall into place for Brian. But Joe said, there's always a few clouds over everybody. The cab driver said, no, not Brian. He was a great athlete. He could have gone on the pro tour in tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone, danced like a Broadway star. And he had a memory like a steel trap. He could remember everybody's birthday, and he knew all about fine wines, which fork to eat with at a restaurant. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse and, power goes out in the whole neighborhood. Well, no wonder you remember him, Joe said. He seems like the model of perfection. Well, I actually never met Brian, said the cab driver. Well, then how do you know so much about him? The cab driver said, because I married his widow. A lot about him. Today, we encountered a rich young man who was, at least from all appearances, this guy was a model of perfection. He seemed to be someone that we could all aspire to be like. And in fact, he had kept all these commandments that Jesus fired at him. He's one step away from perfection. And that's not my problem. I'm not one step away from perfection, right? How many times do I wake up and I say, Lord, this is going to be a different day. I'm going to change today. Or how many times do I celebrate reconciliation and I say, I'm going to be a different person now. I'm not going to relive those old sins, those old habits. And then a couple hours later, I catch myself, I'm in the same boat. Do you ever have that experience? That experience that, you think, okay, I'm going to be a hard worker today, and my boss is going to say, wow, what a great job. And then you find yourself stealing pens from the office, supply store, the stationery shop, right? Oh, all of a sudden you're not that great of an employee anymore. Or you think, today I'm going to be different. I'm going to be a different husband. I'm going to be a different wife. And then by the end of the day, you're not talking to your husband or to your wife, right? So we seek perfection, and yet, just like the young man, despite being so close to perfection, we hear that he walks away sad. Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. In other words, saying, folks, it's really hard to be a Christian. It's very, very difficult. So one thing I want to mention today, and I think it's important for us to remember, is that it's so easy for us to get discouraged in the Christian life. Because if you're really serious about your faith, it's very challenging to live up to what Jesus tells us, how Jesus encourages us to live our life. It's very, very difficult. And in fact, one author once wrote that it's the work of the evil one to discourage us. All of the sins that we experience in our life, that's one thing. But I think the even more challenging issue for us as Christians is to get discouraged and to give up. And believe me, many of my peers and mentors and relatives and family and friends have become so discouraged that they've given up on their faith altogether. Perhaps you've experienced the same thing in your family and perhaps even in your life. Maybe you've come to the point of being so discouraged that you want to give up. Today, be reminded, don't get discouraged. Because in fact, our job is not to make ourselves holy. That's what the rich young man, I think that's where his trouble began. He thought that he could make himself holy, make himself perfect. I know that in our world and our culture, it's very common that we can, change things about ourselves, or we can pay somebody to make ourselves seem perfect. But in reality, it's a whole other ballgame. Remember that that's God's job. God's job is to help to make us holy. And we might think, well, I should be able to do this. Right? I'm a good Christian. I try to live the commandments. I should be able to do this. Remember that to give in to discouragement is like firing God. To give in and to give up is like saying that, God, I don't need you. I can do it myself. And you know what? If I can't do it, then forget about it. Brothers and sisters, we can't unlock the doors of the kingdom, but God can. Our job is to return, to get up, to turn around, and to continue to walk towards Christ. You've heard the story perhaps about a young man who went to visit an old monk and asked him, well, what happens here in this monastery? What do you do all day? And the old monk said, we fall down and we get up. We fall down and we get up. It's so important for us in the Christian life to get up. Otherwise, we'll walk away sad and discouraged. And one thing that we're never going to hear God say to us in our return is, it's about time. What have you been doing? God is not like that. Our God is a God of mercy and compassion, and always welcomes us back, always invites us back. So don't, brothers and sisters, walk away sad. Let God be God. Allow Him to overcome all the impossibility that seems to confront us every day. And so there's two ways that perhaps that the Scripture and our tradition reminders give us that we can follow. Do not give up. Do not give in to discouragement like the rich young man. And the first is that in the passage before this in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus gathers little children around Him, and it says, let the children come to me, and encourages us to be like little children. I think children in their innocence, they are able to just be receptive and to experience the love of God in a fundamentally awesome way. I've often said that when little kids come to receive the Eucharist, there's a sense of connectedness and an intuitive sense of the divine that they have, that all of us can recapture in our life. The other is from our tradition, and it's as we celebrate this last day of the Feast of the Remission. I think one way that we can not get discouraged and continue to return to God is to be like the Mother of God. She who let it be done to her according to His will. That was the story of her life, her receptivity. Brothers and sisters, that's another way that we can't cave in and walk away sad like the rich young man today. God bless us. Love us as we